What happens when a split-second judgment turns into a career-ending nightmare? At JFK International, a senior flight attendant, at the top of her game, makes a fatal mistake. She sees a young black teen in a hoodie, waiting for her flight, and calls him standby trash. What she doesn't know is that the kid she just humiliated isn't just a passenger. He's a VIP diplomat, and he's about to teach her a lesson in karma that will ground her for good. JFK International's Terminal 4 was a glass and steel cathedral of chaos, and Caroline Spencer was its reigning high priestess. At 52, with a ramrod-straight posture sculpted by 3 decades of service for Air France, she didn't just walk, she glided. Her uniform, a deep navy designed by Christian Lacroix, was immaculate. Her red lipstick was a slash of authority. Her blonde hair, pulled into a flawless chignon, was a helmet of professionalism. Caroline believed in order. She believed in hierarchy. And she believed, with the unshakable certainty of a zealot, that she was an infallible judge of character. Her domain tonight was Gate 12, the departure point for Air France Flight 007 to Paris Charles de Gaulle. This was her flight, her cabin, her crew. She stood at the podium, tablet in hand, surveying the great, unwashed masses in the economy boarding zones. She saw them as cargo with special needs, the loud family with the sticky-fingered children, the nervous flyers, the obnoxious college students already smelling of duty-free liquor. Then there was La Première, the first class, her passengers. She'd already checked in a tech CEO, Mr. Peterson, a platinum member she recognized, and a French actress whose name she couldn't recall, but whose Birkin bag she'd clocked instantly. This was her world, the soft murmur of polite conversation, the clink of champagne glasses before takeoff, the civility of it all. Her gaze snagged on a figure slouched in the seating area designated for Zone 1. He was a kid, 17, maybe 18. He was black, and his lanky frame was draped in clothes Caroline mentally catalogued as street. A designer hoodie, yes. She recognized the esoteric logo of a brand like Rude or Fear of God, but worn with a kind of studied, sloppy indifference. Ripped black jeans, expensive-looking, chunky sneakers, a pair of massive, noise-cancelling headphones, probably Beats, she thought with a sniff, completely covered his ears, sealing him in his own world. He was reading, not a phone, but an actual, physical book. The title was obscured by his thumb. Caroline felt the familiar, acidic curl of annoyance. This was the new generation. They wandered into premium spaces like they owned them, all entitlement and no respect. He was, she decided instantly, a buddy pass, the son of a mechanic or a baggage handler, flying standby, hoping for a miracle upgrade. He had no business being in the La Première seating area, taking up space, bringing down the tone. Boarding for Air France Flight 007 to Paris will begin shortly, she announced into the microphone, her voice a crisp, transatlantic monotone. We invite our passengers in La Première and our business-class guests to approach the gate at this time. She watched him. The kid didn't move. He just turned a page. Insolent, she thought. He was probably waiting for his name to be called, hoping to snag the last unsold seat. A junior gate agent, Marco, a young man with kind eyes, and less than a year on the job, leaned over. That's everyone for pre-boarding, Caroline. Looks like 1A is our last one to arrive. A Mr. E. Washington. Caroline tapped her tablet. E. Washington. Yes, probably an Elijah or Ethan. I haven't seen him. I think that's him, Marco said, gesturing discreetly with his chin toward the kid in the hoodie. Caroline's perfectly plucked eyebrow rose. That? Don't be ridiculous, Marco. That's a standby. He's probably just lost. But his name matches the— Marco, she cut him off, her voice dropping to a frosty whisper. I have been doing this job since before you were born. I know a first-class passenger when I see one, and I know a standby when I see one. You handle the economy line. I'll take care of him. She pasted on her customer service smile, a bright, brittle thing that didn't reach her eyes, and glided from behind the podium. She walked directly toward the boy, her heels clicking on the polished floor like tiny, angry hammers. This was her gate, her kingdom, and it was time to remove the rabble. Elijah Washington was not, in fact, listening to music. The Bose headphones were on, but the power was off. They were simply a shield, a polite "do not disturb" sign against the sensory overload of the terminal. He was reading Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth, a book his father, the newly appointed U.S. ambassador to France, had given him. You need to understand the world you're walking into, son, David Washington had said. Not just the pretty parts. Elijah understood. At 17, he was already a veteran of the polite society his father navigated. He was used to the subtle shifts in behavior when he walked into a room, the surprised glances, the overcompensating friendliness, the security guards who always trailed him at a polite distance in high-end stores. He was used to being underestimated, and frankly, he usually preferred it. It let him observe. He had observed this particular flight attendant for the last 10 minutes. He saw how she'd fawned over the businessman, how her smile became a rictus grin for the French actress, and how her eyes had skated over him with a dismissal so complete it was almost impressive. He knew exactly what she was. He felt her presence before he saw her, a cloud of expensive, overbearing perfume. He looked up, his finger holding his place in the book. "Excuse me," she said. The smile was a painted-on grimace. "I'm going to have to ask you to move." Elijah slowly, deliberately, removed his headphones, letting them rest around his neck. "I'm sorry?" "This seating area," Caroline said, gesturing with a sweep of her manicured hand, "is reserved for our first-class and business-class passengers. The general boarding area is over there." She pointed toward the mass of people. Elijah blinked, calm. "I'm in the right place." "No, I'm afraid you're not," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "But it's a common mistake. Now if you'll— I'm in seat 1A, Elijah said, his voice quiet but clear. "Passenger Washington." Caroline actually laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Oh, honey, no, you're not. Seat 1A is E, Washington. That's a diplomat. He's probably late." "I am E, Washington," Elijah said. "Elijah Washington. And I'm not late. I'm just early." The color drained from Caroline's face, replaced by a mottled, angry red. She was being contradicted. By him. In her terminal. She whipped out her tablet, tapped the screen furiously, and saw the name, Washington Elijah, DI. 1A. The DI code flashed next to his name. Diplomatic. For a normal person, this would be the moment of horrified realization and profuse apology. For Caroline Spencer, it was a moment of profound, personal offense. She had been made to look foolish. She felt a hot spike of rage. He had tricked her, sitting there in his costume. He'd done it on purpose to embarrass her. "I see," she said, her voice shearing into an icy sliver. "Well, your passport, then." "Now." Elijah sighed. This too was part of the dance. He reached into his backpack, pulled out the distinctive dark blue diplomatic passport, and handed it to her. She snatched it. She opened it, staring at his picture, then at him, then back at the picture. She was looking for a flaw, a forgery. She found none. The face of Ambassador David Washington smiled benignly from the official visa page. She had to let him on. But she couldn't. wouldn't let him win. She handed the passport back, holding it between 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. Very well. You may board. But I suggest you wait until the line has cleared. But you called first class, Elijah said, standing up. He was taller than her, he realized. And we are waiting, she snapped. A family nearby, the Millers, were fumbling with a stroller, blocking the entrance to the jet bridge. The bridge is clogged. We can't have everyone rushing on at once. Elijah just looked at her, then started to walk past her toward the gate. He wasn't going to play this game. That's when she did it. As he passed, she muttered, just loud enough for him and the people closest to them to hear. Unbelievable. They let standby trash like that buy a ticket, and they think they own the plane. No concept of rules. The words hung in the air, vibrating with a venom that was startling. Mr. Peterson, the tech CEO, heard it and let out a short, appreciative smirk. The Miller family, who also heard it, turned bright red, the mother gasping and quickly shushing her child, too intimidated to speak up. Marco, the gate agent, looked like he'd been struck. Caroline. Elijah stopped. He didn't turn around, not at first. He just stood there, his back to her. The noise of the terminal seemed to fade to a dull roar. Standby trash. It wasn't the first time he'd been called something, but this was different. This was on the job. This was an employee of a multi-billion-dollar international airline. He turned, very slowly. His face was a placid mask, but his eyes were suddenly, terrifyingly, old. What did you just call me? Caroline, realizing she'd been caught, panicked, and did the one thing a cornered animal does. She attacked. I said, "Wait your turn!" She barked, her voice now loud and shrill. Your type always thinks the rules don't apply. You are a security risk, pushing past staff. Now get on the plane or I'll have you removed from the flight. She weaponized his question, turning it back on him. She painted him as the aggressor. Elijah held her gaze for a long, heavy second. He looked at the horrified Miller family, the smirking CEO, and the panicked Marco. He didn't say another word. He simply turned, his shoulders set, and walked down the jet bridge, the book heavy in his hand. Caroline watched him go, her heart pounding with a toxic mix of adrenaline and self-righteousness. She'd put him in his place. She turned back to the podium, ignoring Marco's stunned face. All right, she chirped, the plastic smile back in place. Next zone, please. The La Première cabin on Air France's 777 was less a section of a plane and more a series of private, hushed apartments. Elijah's seat, 1A, was a suite at the very front, enclosed by a floor-to-ceiling curtain. It featured a plush, cream-colored seat that converted to a full-sized bed, a personal minibar, a 24-inch screen, and a small built-in closet. It was designed for maximum privacy and discreet, obsequious service. Elijah entered the suite and closed the curtain. He sat down, the silence of the cabin a stark contrast to the ugliness at the gate. He placed his book on the polished wood-grain table. He didn't unpack. He just sat, breathing. Standby trash. He wasn't angry, not yet. He was calculating. His father's voice echoed in his head. Diplomacy, Elijah, is the art of letting other people have your way. But first, you must understand who they are. He understood Caroline Spencer. A few minutes later, the curtain was pulled back with a sharp swoosh. It was Caroline. Her smile was back, a terrifying rictus. She was holding a single, perfect red rose in a bud vase. "Mr. Washington," she cooed, her voice an octave higher than at the gate. "A pleasure to have you with us in La Première. My name is Caroline, and I am your purser for this flight. Can I get you a glass of our Dom Pérignon 2012 before takeoff? Or perhaps a lovely, non-alcoholic champagne cocktail?" Elijah looked at her. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the desperate attempt to plaster over the crack, to pretend the last 5 minutes had never happened. She wasn't sorry she'd said it. She was just sorry she might get in trouble for it. "Just water, please," Elijah said. His voice was flat. "Of course," she chirped. "And a warm towel to refresh yourself?" "No, thank you. Caviar. We have a wonderful Petrosian selection. I'd just like to be left alone, please. Until we're in the air." He picked up his book, his gaze dropping to the page. It was a dismissal, a clear, cold, and profoundly adult dismissal. Caroline's smile faltered. The impudence. To be snubbed by this child, after she had been so gracious as to offer him champagne. She felt the familiar heat rising in her chest again. "As you wish," she said, her voice tightening. She pulled the curtain closed with a little too much force. She marched back to the galley, fuming. A younger flight attendant, Sarah, a kind-faced woman in her late 20s, was arranging canapes. "What's wrong, Caroline?" Sarah asked. "That kid in 1A, Caroline hissed, yanking open a drawer. "He's some kind of diplomat. Thinks he's royalty. He was unbelievably rude to me at the gate. Accused me of, well, I don't even know what. He's one of those. Spoiled, arrogant, and looking for a handout." Sarah looked confused. "The boy in the hoodie?" "He seemed polite when he boarded. Just said hello and thank you when I showed him the suite." "That's how they get you?" Caroline spat, slamming the drawer shut. "They act all sweet and innocent, but they're just waiting to make your life miserable. He's probably going to demand 1 million free miles because his water wasn't a specific temperature. You watch yourself around him, Sarah. He's trouble." Caroline had now, in her own mind, successfully rewritten the entire encounter. He was the aggressor. He was the rude one. She was the victim, a dedicated professional just trying to do her job in the face of such entitlement. This new narrative settled comfortably over her, a warm blanket of self-delusion. Meanwhile, in 1A, Elijah was no longer reading. He had taken out his phone. He was not on social media. He was on an encrypted messaging app, sending a single, brief text to the embassy's chief of staff. "John. Incident at JFK Gate. AF Purser Caroline Spencer. Verbal harassment. I am fine. Will detail on arrival. Just wanted a paper trail to start. Enjoy your evening." He hit send. The message was delivered instantly. He put the phone away, took a sip of the water Caroline had pointedly and passive-aggressively had Sarah deliver, and closed his eyes as the plane began its powerful, thundering pushback from the gate. The battle at the gate was over. The war for the flight had just begun. The first few hours of the flight passed in the hushed, manufactured twilight of a transatlantic red-eye. The dinner service in La Première was an orchestrated ballet. Anne-Sophie Pic, the 3 Michelin-starred chef, had designed the menu. The wines were first-growth Bordeaux. Elijah ate quietly and methodically. He'd had enough airline food in his life to know this was exceptional, but he took no joy in it. He was polite to Sarah, who was now serving him exclusively. Caroline, he noted, was pointedly managing the other side of the first-class cabin, where Mr. Peterson, the smirking CEO from the gate, was seated. Ah, Mr. Peterson. Elijah had watched him for the past hour. Peterson was the kind of passenger Caroline loved, a white man in a rumpled but expensive suit, loud on his phone, until they were out of range, and with a booming, familiar laugh that demanded attention. He had already consumed 3 small bottles of wine with his dinner, and was now well into the scotch, and he had focused his attention on Sarah. "You're just too pretty to be doing this, sweetheart," Peterson slurred, his voice carrying easily over the engine's hum. "An angel like you, flying the skies." Sarah, who was trying to clear his tray, gave a tight-lipped smile. "Thank you, sir. Are you finished with your meal?" "Only if you'll have a drink with me," he said, winking. "I'm afraid I can't do that, sir." "Come on, just one. What's the harm? Tell me, what's a girl from... Where are you from? You sound like... Ohio." "California, sir," Sarah said, her smile stretched to its limit. "California. Even better," he boomed. "I've got a house in Malibu. You should come see it." He reached out, his hand grazing her waist as she leaned over to get the tray. Sarah recoiled, stumbling back. "Sir, please do not touch me." From across the cabin, Elijah watched Caroline. She saw the whole thing. She saw Sarah's discomfort, saw Peterson's hand, and she did nothing. She turned, adjusted a pillow in an empty seat, and then walked past the confrontation into the galley. This, Elijah thought, was the real test. The stand-by trash comment was pure prejudice. This was a dereliction of duty. Peterson, emboldened by Caroline's indifference, got louder. "Oh, come on, don't be like that. We're all friends here. I'm a platinum member. I practically pay your salary." He tried to stand, but the scotch had its say, and he stumbled, knocking his glass of water onto the floor. "Damn it! Look what you made me do." Sarah was near tears. "I'll get a cloth, sir." "You'd better," he growled. Elijah had seen enough. He calmly unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up and walked the few steps from 1A to 2B. He stood over Mr. Peterson, who was fumbling with a napkin. "Sir," Elijah said, his voice not loud, but carrying the quiet authority of a bass-heavy speaker. Peterson looked up, his eyes bleary. "What do you want, kid? Go back to your... whatever." "You are harassing a member of the flight staff," Elijah said clearly. "You've had too much to drink, and you need to apologize to the lady." Peterson's face, already ruddy from the alcohol, turned a deep, blotchy purple. "Who the hell do you think you are? You're just a kid. This is the adult cabin. Go watch a movie." "I asked you to apologize," Elijah repeated. "Or what?" Peterson sneered. "You gonna hit me? I'll have you arrested for assaulting a passenger, you little—" He let the racial slur hang in the air, unspoken but heavily implied, and that's when Caroline chose to re-emerge from the galley. She took in the scene, the trembling Sarah, the belligerent Peterson, and the calm, imposing figure of Elijah. Her choice was instantaneous. "Mr. Washington," she snapped, her voice like a whip. "What is the meaning of this? Step away from Mr. Peterson at once. You are harassing our passengers." Sarah's jaw dropped. "Caroline, no, he was—" "Quiet, Sarah," Caroline commanded. "Go to the galley, now." Sarah, trained to obey a superior, flinched and fled. Caroline turned her full attention on Elijah, her eyes glittering with triumph. She had him. He was the aggressor. She was protecting the cabin. "Mr. Peterson is one of our most valued customers," Caroline said, placing a proprietary hand on the back of Peterson's seat. "I will not have him be threatened by another passenger. Your behavior is unacceptable. I am officially warning you. Return to your seat, or I will be forced to inform the captain." Elijah looked at her. He looked at the leering, victorious face of Mr. Peterson, and he smiled. It was a small, cold, dangerous smile. "You're right, Caroline," he said softly. "You should inform the captain." He reached up, not to the overhead bin, but to the small, discreet call button over his own seat, 1A. He pressed it. "In fact," Elijah said, his voice resonating through the silent cabin, "I insist on it. And please tell him that passenger Elijah Washington, in seat 1A, traveling on diplomatic papers, is declaring a level 2 security threat." Caroline's face went from triumph to ashen white terror. A level 2 threat was not a complaint about wine. It was passenger on passenger, or passenger-on-crew belligerence. It required the captain's intervention, and the phrase diplomatic papers combined with security threat was a cocktail of career-ending poison. You can't," she stammered. "I just did," Elijah said. He sat back down in his own seat, buckled his belt, and folded his hands in his lap. "I'll wait." It took less than 2 minutes. The La Première cabin, already a bubble of privilege, became a tomb of silent tension. Mr. Peterson seemed to sober up slightly, a flicker of fear in his drunken eyes. Caroline was frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. The cockpit door opened. Out stepped not just the captain, but also the first officer. This was not a casual visit. Captain Philippe Dubois was a man who radiated calm authority. He was ex-French Air Force, with silver hair and eyes that had seen everything. He looked at the scene, the trembling purser, the drunk businessman, and the impossibly calm teenager. "What is this?" Dubois said, his voice a low rumble. Caroline found her voice first, a high-pitched, desperate torrent of words. "Captain, thank goodness. This passenger, Mr. Washington, he threatened Mr. Peterson. He was aggressive. He was shouting. He's been trouble since the gate. I tried to de-escalate, but he's out of control. And Mr. Peterson is a platinum member, and he felt threatened, and is that so?" Captain Dubois said. He turned his piercing gaze not to Caroline, not to Peterson, but to Elijah. "Passenger Washington, I was informed of a level 2 threat. From you. Explain." Elijah unfolded his hands. He spoke calmly, his voice a perfect model of diplomatic reportage. "Captain Dubois," he began, "my name is Elijah Washington. I am traveling on diplomatic passport DI USA 0045B. At the JFK gate, your purser, Ms. Spencer, attempted to deny me boarding, accusing me of not having a first-class ticket. She then referred to me, in front of several other passengers, as standby trash." Caroline gasped. "That is a lie, a complete fabrication." She then accused my type of not knowing the rules. Elijah continued, as if she hadn't spoken. I let it go. On board, I have been in my suite, disturbing no one. For the last 20 minutes, this passenger, he gestured to Peterson, Mr. Peterson, has been intoxicated, loud, and has been sexually harassing flight attendant Sarah. He physically touched her. "I did not," Peterson blustered, but his voice was weak. When I requested he apologize and desist, Ms. Spencer intervened, not to protect her staff, but to protect Mr. Peterson. She accused me of harassment and ordered flight attendant Sarah to the galley, preventing her from making a report. Ms. Spencer has demonstrated, first at the gate and now in the air, a complete inability to perform her duties. She has allowed a passenger to be harassed. She has ignored a clear violation of your airline's policy, and she has actively sided with the aggressor. She is a liability to this flight and to your crew. That is the security threat, Captain. There was a profound, damning silence. Captain Dubois looked at Caroline. Her face was ashen. He looked at Peterson, who was now sweating profusely and refusing to make eye contact. He looked back at Elijah. "You have a very precise memory, Mr. Washington," the captain said. "It's a family trait," Elijah replied. Dubois nodded, a single sharp gesture. He had all the information he needed. The DI on the manifest was not just a code. It was a promise of a mountain of paperwork if mishandled. And this was a disaster. "Caroline," the captain said, his voice flat and cold, "you are relieved of your duties. Go to the crew rest area. Do not speak to any passengers. Do not speak to any crew. You will be met in Paris." "Captain, Philippe, you can't," she whispered. "He's lying. It's his word against mine." No, a small voice said. Sarah had returned from the galley. She was trembling from head to foot, but she stood tall. Captain, Mr. Washington is telling the truth. Every word. Mr. Peterson, he touched me. And Caroline, she told me to be quiet. It was the final nail. Get to the back, now, Captain Dubois commanded Caroline. Caroline Spencer, the 30-year veteran, the queen of the cabin, crumpled. The authority vanished, the poise shattered. She was just a terrified woman. She turned, her face a mess of shame and rage, and stumbled away, disappearing behind the curtain to the galley, her long, immaculate career ending in a single, humiliating walk. Dubois then turned to Peterson. Monsieur Peterson, your behavior is unacceptable. You will be served no more alcohol. You will remain in your seat. If you speak to another member of my staff or any other passenger, I will have you restrained. On arrival in Paris, you will be met by the gendarmerie. Is that clear? Peterson, all the fight gone, just nodded, his face pale. The captain looked at Elijah. My sincere apologies for this, Mr. Washington. We will do everything to make the rest of your flight comfortable. Thank you, Captain, Elijah said. I'd appreciate it if you'd ensure Flight Attendant Sarah is not penalized for speaking up. She will be commended, Dubois said firmly. He nodded once, then returned to the cockpit. The La Première cabin was silent once more, but the power dynamic had been irrevocably, seismically altered. Elijah Washington, the standby trash, was now unquestionably in charge. The remaining 5 hours of the flight were, on the surface, peaceful. Sarah, who was now in charge of the La Première cabin, served with a quiet, efficient gratitude. She came to Elijah's suite once. Thank you, she said, her voice low. You didn't have to do that. No passenger has ever done that. You shouldn't have to work in a place where that's a problem, Elijah said, looking up from his book. She was your superior. She should have protected you. They break you down, Sarah admitted. Caroline, she's from the old school. She always said, the passenger is always right, especially the rich ones. I guess you proved her wrong. The passenger is just a person, Elijah said. And so are you. When the fasten seatbelt sign chimed for their descent into Paris, the tension was still palpable. Mr. Peterson hadn't moved a muscle. He just stared blankly at the screen, a picture of drunken, terrified sobriety. The plane landed smoothly at Charles de Gaulle. As it taxied to the gate, Captain Dubois came on the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived. We ask that all passengers remain in their seats. The French National Gendarmerie will be boarding the aircraft to handle a passenger matter. We apologize for the delay. A ripple of nervous murmurs went through the plane. In first class, they knew. The jet bridge connected. The doors opened. And first on the plane were not the disembarking passengers, but 4 heavily armed, blue-uniformed gendarmes. They walked straight past Elijah's suite to 2B. Mr. Peterson, one officer said, his French accent thick. You will come with us. Peterson, a broken man, gathered his things and was escorted off the plane, his face a pasty grey. The passengers were then cleared to disembark. Elijah gathered his backpack and his book. He was the first one out. He stepped onto the jet bridge and was immediately met by 3 figures. One was his father, Ambassador David Washington, who, despite the early hour, looked impeccable in a suit. His face was a mask of concern that melted into relief when he saw his son. The second was the U.S. Embassy security chief, a formidable man named John. The third, and most telling, was a man Elijah didn't know, but whose face was a mask of pure corporate panic. He wore an Air France lapel pin. Elijah, Ambassador Washington said, pulling his son into a one-armed hug. You're all right. I'm fine, Dad, Elijah said. The Air France executive stepped forward, his hand outstretched. Mr. Washington? Ambassador, I am Jean-Luc Moreau, Executive Vice President of Customer Relations for Air France. I cannot apologize enough. Captain Dubois radioed ahead. We are appalled. Appalled is a good start, Ambassador Washington said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. His hand was still on Elijah's shoulder. Elijah, for his part, just looked at Moreau. Mr. Moreau, I appreciate you meeting me, but I have a few things I need to tell you. What happened on the flight, that was only half of it. The real problem started at the gate. Moreau's face, already pale, went chalk white. The gate? Your purser, Caroline Spencer, called my son standby trash before he ever set foot on the plane, the ambassador said, his voice like ice. That's not a customer relations problem, Mr. Moreau. That's a diplomatic incident. From the plane, the crew was now disembarking. Caroline Spencer, carrying her bags, walked onto the jet bridge and froze. She saw it all. She saw the kid she had terrorized, standing not with a parent, but with the American ambassador. She saw the embassy security chief. She saw her own boss's boss, Jean-Luc Moreau, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. She saw the new, unshakable reality. Elijah didn't even look at her. He was too busy giving his report, his voice calm and steady as the gendarmes walked by, taking notes. Caroline Spencer, in that moment, realized she wasn't just fired. She was finished. For Caroline Spencer, the next 48 hours were a descent into a cold, sterile purgatory. She was not arrested, not detained, but in many ways it was worse. She was deactivated. She was taken off the return flight schedule and checked into a standard-issue crew hotel near the Roissy-en-France airport. Her crew key card, the one that gave her access to the hidden world of flight staff lounges and back-of-house shortcuts, was no longer valid. She was an outsider in her own world, a ghost in the terminal. She spent a full day in the beige-colored room, the silence broken only by the sound of other planes taking off. She was locked in a feverish loop of self-justification. It was his fault. The kid was a plant, a provocateur. Sarah was a hysterical, ungrateful backstabber. Peterson was a victim of a woke shakedown. She rehearsed her lines, polished her story, and prepared for the misunderstanding to be cleared up. She was, after all, Caroline Spencer. She had 30 years. What was this kid? The summons came not as a phone call from a sympathetic station manager, but as a cold, impersonal email. Mr. Spencer, you are required to attend a meeting at Air France headquarters, 45 Rue de Paris, at Euro 9, La Bourgeoisie tomorrow. This is a mandatory review of your conduct on Flight EO07. Please be prompt. She arrived wearing her full uniform, her armor, only to feel conspicuously out of place. She was directed not to the crew operations center, but to the corporate wing, a place of glass walls and hushed, expensive-looking executives. She was shown into a conference room. It was cold. Across the polished mahogany table sat not one, but 3 people. Jean-Luc Moreau, looking like he hadn't slept, a stern-looking woman she didn't know, who introduced herself as Chloe Dura, the head of human resources, and a man in a razor-sharp suit, the airline's chief legal counsel. There was no friendly chat. No coffee was offered. Caroline, Moreau began, his voice flat. We are here to discuss the events of Flight 07. This was her cue. Caroline launched into her practiced, passionate defense. Jean-Luc, thank heavens. This whole thing is a complete fabrication, a nightmare. This passenger, this boy, He was aggressive from the moment I saw him at the gate. He was dressed like... Well, he was intentionally provocative. He was trying to get a rise, accusing me of profiling. He tricked me. Then on the plane, he threatened Mr. Peterson, a valuable platinum flyer who was just being jovial. Sarah, who is young and, frankly, overly sensitive, overreacted. This boy, he fed on that. He's a spoiled, manipulative child who played the diplomat card to ruin my reputation. I was de-escalating. I was protecting the cabin. She finished, breathing hard, her face flushed with self-righteousness. The three executives just stared at her. The legal counsel was the first to speak. Thank you for that. Creative summary, Mrs. Spencer. Now let's discuss the facts. He slid a tablet across the table and pressed play. JFK, Gate 12, 1843 local time. It was the security footage. Silent at first. It showed her approach. It showed her snatching the passport. Then the lawyer tapped an icon, and the audio, captured by the high-sensitivity podium microphones, kicked in. She heard her own voice, clear as a bell, vibrating with venom. Unbelievable. They let stand-by trash like that buy a ticket. Caroline's blood ran cold. She stared at the small screen, at her own sneering face, and felt the blood drain from her own. The smug, ugly superiority in her tone was undeniable. "A lie, you said?" the lawyer asked, his voice silk. I was under stress," she stammered. The gate was chaotic. "Then let's move on," said Chloe Duras from HR. She placed a stack of papers on the table. "The witness statements. This one is from Gate Agent Marco. He details, and I quote, Ms. Spencer's obvious and aggressive prejudice, and how she refused his confirmation of the passenger's identity. This one," Duras continued, tapping the next paper, "is from the Miller family, passengers in Zone 2. They contacted us this morning. They were appalled by the staff's abuse of a young black passenger, and will be posting about their experience on social media. They also heard the trash comment, as did, it seems, half the pre-boarding area." Caroline was sinking. "They misheard. They're colluding." "Are they all, Miss Spencer?" Duras said, her voice dropping. "And finally, we have the formal statement from flight attendant Sarah. It's extensive. It doesn't just detail Mr. Peterson's harassment, which our legal team believes is grounds for a major lawsuit from her against us. It also details a pattern," Duras read from the page. She notes, "The incident in January with the Nigerian family in business class, whom you refused to serve properly because you were, quote, uncomfortable." She notes Caroline's constant complaints about the ghetto passengers on the Atlanta route. She lists 3 separate dates. "She's lying!" Caroline shrieked, the mask of professionalism gone. "She's a junior, a child. She's trying to get me fired. This is character assassination." "No, Ms. Spencer," Jean-Luc Moreau said, his voice heavy with a weariness that went beyond anger. "This," he said, sliding a single heavy stock paper across the table, "is the final piece." It was a letter. On the formal, embossed letterhead of the United States Department of State. "The child you're referring to," Moreau said, "has a very, very powerful father. This is an official diplomatic complaint. It doesn't just request an apology. It demands a full review of Air France's anti-discrimination and de-escalation training protocols. It cites a clear and present bias within our senior staff. It's been sent to our CEO and the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This isn't an HR complaint, Caroline. This is an international incident. You didn't just insult a passenger. You threatened our entire commercial and diplomatic relationship with one of our key allies." Caroline looked at the mountain of evidence, the video, the audio, The passenger statements, the damning report from her own crew, the letter from the US government, her carefully built world, her entire narrative of victimhood shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. "You are a liability, Caroline," Moreau said, his voice void of all emotion. "One we can no longer afford." Chloe Dura spoke, her voice crisp and administrative. "Your employment with Air France is terminated, effective immediately, for gross misconduct, endangerment of crew, and violation of international passenger rights codes." The legal counsel added, "Your union will be notified, but given the insurmountable nature of the audio and video evidence, not to mention the pattern of behavior, I would not expect their support. Continuing this would be frivolous. You will surrender your company ID and all credentials," Duras continued. "Your flight benefits and those of your family are revoked permanently. Your 30 years are gone." Caroline finally broke. She was no longer a queen. She was just a 52-year-old woman in a room she couldn't leave. My pension," she whispered. "My life. I've given you 30 years. You can't just—" "The non-revocable portion of your pension will be handled by the administrator, as per French law," the lawyer said, already gathering his files. Chloe Dura stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "That is all. A one-way economy ticket back to New York has been booked for you for this afternoon. On Delta." The final, calculated, professional insult. She wasn't even worthy of her own airline. Security was called to escort a weeping, uncomprehending Caroline Spencer from the building she had once considered her second home. The story didn't just leak, it detonated. Within a week, an anonymized, but very detailed, internal memo about a Level 2 diplomatic incident was circulating among cabin crews at rival airlines. It became a case study in de-escalation training, a what not to do of a spectacular, career-ending failure. Travel blogs, piecing together the story from passenger accounts and airline insiders, were less discreet. Air France purser fired after standby trash, comment to US diplomat. How one attendant's bias grounded her for good. Caroline's name, once synonymous with seniority and authority, became a toxic asset. She was officially blacklisted. In the tight-knit world of aviation, Caroline Spencer was now a red flag in HR systems. The note on her file was a kiss of death: termination, gross misconduct, endangerment of crew, diplomatic complaint. The union, after reviewing the undeniable video, audio, and the sheer volume of corroborating witness statements, quietly informed her they could not, in good faith, pursue her case. She was alone. Her colleagues, the ones she'd shared galleys and layovers with for decades, suddenly stopped returning her calls. She was no longer one of them. She was a cautionary tale. She spent the first 6 months living off her savings, her days a blur of rage, self-pity, and bitter disbelief. She watched her carefully curated life unravel. She was forced to sell her condo, the one with the view of the city, because her pension was slashed to the bare, legally mandated minimum. The flight for life, perks, the very core of her identity, were gone. The woman who had breakfast in Paris and dinner in New York could no longer afford to leave the state. Her anger slowly curdled into a hollow, acidic despair. She applied to other airlines. First, the major carriers, Delta, United, American, who all sent back polite, instant rejections. Then, the charter companies. Then, the budget carriers. No one would touch her. Finally, after nearly a year of rejections, her savings exhausted, she was offered a job that required a security pass to get airside and a pulse, manager in training at a Voyager's duty-free shop, back at JFK, in Terminal 4. Her new uniform was an ill-fitting, mustard yellow polyester polo shirt and scratchy black slacks. Her new domain was not a $300 million aircraft, but a 500-square-foot shop smelling of perfume samples and stale chocolate. Her new clientele was not the La Première elite, but the very rabble she had once despised, tourists haggling over the price of a bottle of Johnny Walker or complaining that the M&Ms were cheaper at the Hudson News. Her days were spent stocking shelves, her knees cracking as she knelt to arrange giant Toblerone bars. Her hands, once steady enough to pour champagne during severe turbulence, were now chapped and raw from the cleaning solution she used on the glass counters. But the real torture, the true, grinding karma, was the view. Every hour she would see them, the crews. She saw the Lufthansa crews, the Emirates crews, the Virgin Atlantic crews, and worst of all, the Air France crews. They walked past her shop, a parade of her former life. Their Christian Lacroix uniforms were immaculate. Their heads were high. They were laughing, discussing their layover in Paris or their flight to Nice. She had trained some of them. She had written up some of them. Now they walked past, and their eyes slid right over her. She was invisible, a piece of the terminal furniture, a ghost stocking shelves. One evening, almost exactly a year to the day of the incident, she was on her knees, refilling the display of cheap souvenirs, her back aching. She heard a laugh, a deep, confident, and familiar one. Her blood froze. She looked up, peering from behind a rack of I3NY t-shirts. It was them. Ambassador David Washington, his wife, and their son, Elijah. They were not flying out. They were arriving, likely for a stateside visit. Elijah, he was transformed. The kid in the hoodie was gone. In his place was a 19-year-old man, home from his first year at Georgetown's School of Foreign Service. He was wearing a sharp, dark blue blazer, laughing as he spoke with his father. He walked with an easy, unshakable confidence, a power that had nothing to do with a passport and everything to do with who he was. Caroline instinctively recoiled, ducking back behind the shelf. Her heart was a trapped bird against her ribs. She was terrified. Terrified he would see her. Terrified he would point or laugh or, worst of all, say something to his father. The family paused just outside her shop, waiting for the ambassador to finish a text. Elijah, bored, let his gaze drift. His eyes scanned the shop, the wall of liquor, the counter of watches, the display of chocolates. And then, for a fraction of a second, his eyes passed right over Caroline's face. She held her breath. There was nothing. No flash of recognition, no flicker of malice, no hint of triumph. He didn't see her. He just saw a middle-aged woman in a bad uniform, kneeling by a shelf. He blinked, looked away, and turned back to his father. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," the ambassador said, pocketing his phone. They turned, and as a family, they walked toward the diplomatic fast-track exit. Caroline Spencer was left leaning against the shelf, the sharp edges of the chocolate boxes digging into her back. The full, crushing weight of her new reality settled on her. That was the karma. Her greatest fear was that he would see her and gloat. The reality was so much worse. He hadn't seen her at all. He hadn't thought about her in 364 days. That incident, the one that had defined and destroyed her entire life, had been, for him, a minor, unpleasant anecdote. A Tuesday. He had moved on, up and out into a world of limitless possibility. And she was left here, grounded, a forgotten ghost in Terminal 4, in a polyester shirt, surrounded by the trash she had, in one single, hateful breath, become. In the end, it wasn't just about the words. It was about the abuse of power. Caroline Spencer thought her seniority and her uniform made her untouchable. She mistook a young man's quiet confidence for weakness, and his casual clothes for a lack of status. She didn't just fail a customer, she failed her crew, she failed her company, and she failed herself. Elijah Washington didn't just win a confrontation, he exposed a rot. He used his power not for revenge, but for accountability, protecting the truly powerless person in the room, the junior flight attendant. This is a powerful reminder. The respect you show to the person you think has no power is the truest measure of your own character. Karma, in this case, wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a termination letter, a revoked pension, and a lifetime of regret spent watching others fly. What do you think of this story? Do you believe karma is real? Have you ever seen someone so spectacularly misjudge a situation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of justice and hard-learned lessons, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories where karma always gets the final word.